Okay, oh, she scares me, that lady, when she says that. So, all right. My name's Terry Handy and I'm co-founder of pmXcite. We're an online training business where we provide property management support for growing agencies. And we have a great membership called the PM Club where we have all sorts of goodies to help make the lives of property managers easier, including templates, monthly training sessions, guest experts, micro courses. We cover topics like Trello and onboarding tenants online. We also have a great monthly newsletter we create for our members to send to their current and prospective owners. I always encourage people to send it out to the ones that they've got in their pipeline as well. And we take a common sense approach to property management with what we like to call the pmXcite twist, which sounds a little bizarre, I know, but once you get to know us, you'll understand. And we've recently added another string to our bow and introduced a new solution for property management businesses around increasing the number of properties they have under management. So that's called the Next Level Growth Challenge. My business partner, Sean Lee Draper, and I looked long and hard to find the right person to deliver coaching and support for BDMs. You know, BDMs who are serious about generating new business. And like, boy, did we find the right person. You guys are going to meet her today. She's an award-winning BDM. Natalie was actually the #1 BDM in the Harcourts group, nationally in 2020. Like that was just like only a moment ago. And she managed to bring on a cool 333 new managements in that 12-month period, which is pretty impressive, I have to say. I'm impressed anyway. And after watching Nat coach and support the participants in round 1 of our Next Level Growth Challenge, I'm even more impressed. I know how much value she brings to the table and how generous she is with her knowledge. And in fact, as part of the challenge, she basically hands over her game plan. So all the templates she used, the scripts, her ideas, we've just been blown away by how much she shared and the results that we've already seen from the challenges that were in round 1. So she's actually demonstrated how smoothly she's made this transition from a BDM out there on the floor, out on the front line. And now she's actually a coach, which is fantastic. I cannot rave enough about her. I know I'm banging on. We've got registrations about to close for round 1. There's a couple of spots left, I think. We sold out with round 2, sorry. We sold out with round 1. Round 2, we've got a couple of spots left, but I think it closes tomorrow or Friday. So if after today's session you think you might be interested in working with Nat, in the email we'll send with the recording after we finish today, we'll include a link for you to follow so you can find out a little bit more about the Next Level Growth Challenge. So today Natalie's going to cover off on 4 fee objections that you guys as BDMs come up against when pitching for new business. There's a whole heap more. I think we have about 12 that our challengers have access to, but the ones today that she's going to talk about, they're definitely some of the most common. And what they are is when other agents are offering cheaper fees, we hate that. When someone's waiving the letting fee, as a boss, I used to hate that. Marketing, when someone thinks that they don't need marketing or even professional photos, like why would you need that? Particularly if you're in somewhere like Brisbane where the market's so hot. You might be hearing a little bit of that from your prospective owners. And also when you come up against situations where other agents are offering management free periods, like it's very common to see, or hear about 6 months being offered free. And that's a tough one to combat as well. So let's get into it. Natalie's going to take you through those 4 fee objections. And yeah, let's go, Nat. I'll mute myself if you can just open up. Thanks, guys.
Fabulous. Thank you for the fantastic introduction, Terry. Terry didn't mention that I made the transition from BDM to maternity leave before I moved into the coaching role. And I don't know if it's been as smooth transitioning into mum life. I think I'm still getting the hang of it. So any mums out there balancing BDM life and mum life, my hat's off to you. It can be a little bit tricky, but we're definitely finding our feet. Coaching, on the other hand, I have absolutely loved. As Terry mentioned, we had some phenomenal results for our round 1 challenges, and I genuinely enjoyed seeing every single one of them start here and finish here. It was really phenomenal, and I'm really excited for round 2, which does kick off on Monday. So as Terry mentioned, I am going to be covering those 4 objections today in terms of overcoming those fees that you are coming up against. But before I dive into that, I did want to spend some time talking about things you can be doing prior to getting these objections, just to stop them dead in their tracks. When you think about property management, we always want to be proactive rather than reactive. So we want to talk about things we can be doing. So by the time we get to the fee conversation, it's not even a conversation. And that's what I'm going to spend a little bit of time on at the start of this session before I dive in and actually give you the scripts I use to those 4 objections that Terry did mention. So if you think about why someone has an objection to your fee, it ultimately comes down to the fact that they don't see value in the fee that you've proposed. This could be for a number of reasons. And when you look at the definition of value, it actually states, and I really like this because it's really relevant, an amount of goods, services, or money considered to be suitable and a fair equivalent. So when we think about that from a property management perspective, the client has to feel like what you're offering them is suitable or fair equivalent. So if they're negotiating on your fees, that tells us we haven't demonstrated enough value. And this brings me to the topic which I want to cover on how and when you can be demonstrating value so that your fees don't come into consideration. This starts with first impressions. And as part of the challenge content, we do spend a whole week focusing on the pre-appraisal, the appraisal, and the post-appraisal process. And the reason for this is because I know having a detailed professional process for all 3 of these components is absolutely vital to having a higher conversion rate from appraisal to listing. So I want you to take a few seconds to think about your process for when a potential client calls into the office. Is the receptionist that answers your phone call energetic and eager to assist? Or are they grumpy because a tenant's just called 5 times and the property manager hasn't called them back and they're now in a hurry to get off the phone? Does the client, when they call into the office, get immediate correspondence and communication from either yourself or someone in the office? Or do they have to wait for the business development manager, the property manager, or the principal to call them back after they get out of their meeting? And I know what you're thinking. I call them back ASAP, even if that is between my appointments. But then if that is you, I want you to ask yourself, were you hurried because you're about to pop into your next appraisal or you're about to do your next routine inspection? Did you make a great first impression yourself? Did you ask the really quality questions you normally would to ensure that when you walk into that appraisal and meet that client, you know what's important? People want fast, accurate communication. They don't want it in an hour. They want it now, thanks to Google. The key, Uber, the likes of those instantaneous services, and property management now is exactly the same. The key word in my question to everyone was process. And what you will find is I am very, very big on processes. And that's because it means nothing gets missed. Everyone knows their responsibility and the client experience will be absolutely seamless if there is a process in place. I want to talk through what I did when I was a business development manager for this pre-appraisal process. And this is just a little snippet of it because there is greater detail in the course, but I did want to run through it with you today. So when I was a business development manager and a potential client called into our office, the process was that the receptionist or whoever answered the phone, if sometimes the overflow went to property management, would of course attempt to transfer the call to me. If I was unavailable, they would take a phone number, an email address, a full name, and phone number, name, email, address from the potential client and send what was called to them a blue box. Now, this was a templated email that went out to the potential client immediately. It had a number of important attachments around it. So it included some smoke alarm information, landlord insurance, an overview of our property management team, a pre-listing guide, which was basically a book on testimonials and campaign results that I had achieved as a business development manager, and also a little bit of information about our office. And then it also included a timeline in which they could expect to hear back from me. So it always said, Natalie will be in contact by close of business today. And the reason we put that in there was to set an expectation around when they could expect to hear from me. And then there was also a link to my social media recommending they get a bit more an idea of who I am and how I communicate. Now, there was a few reasons that this blue box works so effectively in our office. And one of those was because obviously the client received immediate communication and it was professional and it had a number of information, a number of attachments or information they could read through to start to get some of the answers to their questions. Number two was the email specifically specified close of business that day, but I would call as quickly as I could. Now, that didn't mean immediately if I was about to rush into an appointment because I couldn't have a quality conversation, but it was always within an hour or two. Now, under delivering and over expecting is what we want to do in every instance of the client communication. So they weren't expecting to hear from me, even though originally when they called into the office, they definitely wanted to speak to someone immediately, which they did. They got a professional email with some information and they weren't expecting to hear until the end of the day. When I call in an hour or 2 hours, they're immediately impressed with how much communication they've received already. And thirdly, we send them across to my social media. Now, this link gave them an indication of my results, our awards, client testimonial, informational, educational videos. So by the time I walk through the door for the actual appraisal, they feel like they know me because I also was very personal on my social media. They feel like I'm the expert and clients are willing to pay for good service and experts in their field. So that pre-appraisal process is absolutely vital so that when you do get into the client's door and you do start to talk about fees, you've already demonstrated a really high amount of value. The second part that you can do to make sure that you're adding value before you get to the fee conversation is what conversations and what information you're running through during the appraisal process. Do you have a detailed agenda that you cover off on each time you meet a new client, or do you go in there and wing it, as I like to call it? Now, I know you don't see it as winging it. You see it as tailoring your approach and information to the client. But in comparison to other BDMs that may have been in, your appraisal could feel unorganized. It could feel like it's lacking detail, and it could also feel unprofessional. Now, I'm not saying don't tailor your approach to your communication. Don't tailor the way in which you deliver the information. But what I am saying is 99% of the time, your appraisal should be consistent, detailed, and professional. And you can only do this by having an agenda that you cover off on every single time. So I want to talk through some of the things I believe should be in the appraisal process. And again, this is in the course, in the challenge detail. I'm only going to give you a summary of what I include, but as part of the challenge, we do run through, okay, these things should be included, but what should you be saying around them? At what stage should you be discussing with the client? At what questions should you be asking them? So I believe as part of the appraisal process, every single time, whether this is a first-time investor or not, the following should be covered. Detailed information around compliance. So smoke alarms, blind compliance, pool compliance, landlord, and building insurance options. Now, not just giving them information on that, but explaining that in depth, detail, and why and what parts of those compliance components are important. Then you also want to be talking through ways in which you'll increase their return via external methods such as tax depreciation schedules and home loan reviews. You want to be providing an overview of your office performance and how these results can affect a landlord and how lack of these results can affect a landlord. You want to be setting the difference between you and other property managers that they may be meeting, your results and other agencies in the area. Now, I'm not saying talk about that other agencies in the area, but it's about land mining and setting those expectations on the service, vacancy rates and occupancy rates that a landlord should expect to be receiving. You want to talk in depth about the different types of markets, the way that being on market time-wise can impact price, the way in which you will market their property to ensure that you get the most amount of tenants through the door, what marketing requirements are required to maximize the exposure. Now, this should include professional photography, digital decluttering, virtual furniture, floor plans, a listing on realestate.com and domain, a signboard out the front, flyer drops, the detailed text you'll create to ensure that when you're advertising their property online, you're targeting the right demographic of tenant. It's about the language you use also, guys, when you are explaining this. How many other BDMs do you think are walking in saying, we're going to do this, this, and this? And the reason we're doing this is because we know the demographic of tenant that's going to be attracted to your type of home is this. In order to get those people through the door, I need to strategically plan a marketing strategy for you and your property. And that's what I do best. And that's what I'm going to deliver as part of my 5-star service. So that's just one script I'd recommend using around marketing. You also want to start to explain to them how you're going to advertise the property online, how you will vet the potential tenants, what the process will look like for this, and what communication they can expect around this part of the process. Right down to emails, text, calls they're going to receive, the amount of time that's reasonable for them to respond to a tenancy application to ensure they don't miss out on pick of the bunch. Explain tenants are applying for multiple properties. We want to make sure that we get you the very best tenant. And guys, I could talk all day about the process for an appraisal, because this is where, if you do it right, you don't have to defend your fees. Once you get to that fee conversation, they're like, wow, this BDM is going to get me the best price in the market, the best tenant. They're going to reduce my vacancy period, and they're really going to look after my property. You want to talk through the water compliance, the process for maintenance, the property getting rental ready, the costs that are involved around payments and invoices, and when we'd arrange this payment for them. You want to talk about the property management team and the structures, but then you want to talk about how those structures are going to benefit the client. Because again, if you're a property management team that has pods, for example, you want to talk about why this is a benefit to them rather than a portfolio. Because then when the next BDM goes in and they've only got portfolio and not structures, they're like, oh, that's right. Nat mentioned pod is better because it means that there's always going to be someone there to communicate with. So again, it's about setting those expectations or the lack of expectations when other BDMs come in. You want to talk about the lease renewal process, when they will hear from the property manager, right down to the number of days. So our property management team is going to reach out to you 80 days prior to the lease being renewed. Then this is what that process is going to look like. You want to talk about why and when we would recommend a lease renewal and what conditions we take into consideration. You want to talk about the process if the tenant wasn't to re-sign the lease or they didn't want to offer a new tenancy agreement. You want to be stating timeframes. And the reason you want to be specific and detailed, guys, is because they need to know that you are the expert. No one else mentioned that it's a 60-day notice period, even if the lease is expired and they didn't know that. But you did, because you're detailed and you're professional. They want you in their corner. You want to talk about the process of when a tenant vacates. And again, this is setting yourself up so when you come up against those objections around the let fee, and you're going to see this, I reference the vacate process in the let fee objection script. You want to talk about court. What percentage of your disputes actually end up in court? Of course, only state this statistic if it's a good one. And again, that's everything I talk about. Processing insurance claims, what's involved, talk through the current market, show them a comparable analysis that's branded, it's specific, and it's accurate to their property. Show them what to look for. Talk around, I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver in terms of price, but the market is so hot at the moment. Your property is worth what someone's willing to pay for it. It's my job to give you a fantastic marketing strategy, get the most amount of tenants through the door, get you the best tenant in the shortest possible time frame. And that's what I'm going to do for you. So it's about giving them that confidence of what you're doing and that you're going to deliver on that. Once you've talked through the comparable market analysis, I want you to run through a full Form 6 or a management agreement if you're not in Queensland, because not all BDMs are doing this. And this was something that really surprised me as we went through round 1 and I started to talk to the challengers. Who runs through a Form 6? Could you believe that only 33% of those challengers did? Well, we've now changed that and we've got 100% of challenges doing that. And again, because this is a point of difference that other people aren't doing out there in the market. This is another opportunity to provide more value before you get to the fee objections, which I'm going to cover as part of the Form 6 as I run through the fees with them. Then you'd go through to discussing the fees. This is the very last thing I discuss with the clients once I added all this value, and my appraisals normally went for around 45 to 60 minutes for the full appraisal. Now, through this 45 minutes, you've built rapport, you've built trust, and you've demonstrated a lot more value than that BDM that walked in the door and winged it. So I want you to think about what's your process for the appraisal. Does this need more work? Does it include every single thing I just mentioned and probably double that? Because if it doesn't, this is something I'd recommend working on. And lastly, I want you to think about, were you the agent that asked questions? Did you listen? And then did you provide solutions specific to that client? Something I got taught by one of my principals was this isn't a listing presentation. This was a listening presentation. Did you listen? Did you provide a solution to their concerns? Did you find out what their illness was and prescribe them medication specific to that? Or were you really generalized? Did you ask really quality questions to establish what's important to the client? You know, as you go through the marketing part of the process. So, you know, what's most important for you, Mr. Client? Is it the best tenant? Is it a reduced vacancy period, or is it the highest weekly rent? And look, I know as a landlord myself, we want all three of those, but I'm going to tailor your campaign around what's most important to you. What I just did then was paused, and I didn't speak again until the client answered the question. And I listened. Then I provided a solution based on what was most important to them. So if the weekly rent was most important to them, well, I knew they were going to want a premium weekly rent. So don't crush their dreams. The market, if it's out there, you're the BDM that's going to get it. So let's work to get them that price. But let's manage their expectations. Let's talk about how time on market impacts price. So absolutely, you want to launch to the market at $600 a week. Let's launch to the market where we know the most inquiry is within that first 7 days. If we don't have the uptake in that first 7 days, what we'll do is we'll amend from there. Then what I'm going to do on a Monday morning is provide you a marketing campaign overview. That's going to tell us what we need to do to make sure that we don't have a prolonged time on market. Again, there's some more scripts and dialogues around that, but I could talk all day. If you can focus on doing all of the above, the fee conversation, I promise you, will become a lot easier. In saying that, I do want to talk through the scripts and dialogues that you can use when you do come up against these fees, because you're absolutely going to come up against these fees. And look, I'm not going to tell you that these fee objections are going to work 100% of the time, because they're not. I didn't have a 100% conversion rate. I wasn't able to convert every client because they only wanted 6.6%. They weren't happy with 9.35%. And that's okay. At that time, I wasn't the right agent for them. But that doesn't mean that later on down the track, which I can promise you happened on far too many occasions, which I didn't complain about, but that client didn't receive the service at 6.6%, and they came back to me. And I still have those clients come back to me years later. I just referred one back to my business that I missed about 2.5 years ago in Ferny Hills, came back to me and said, Nat, we want to transfer across. It will happen. If you do miss them on the fee, be professional. Thank them for their time. Give them a reminder. No worries at all. Look, it's a shame that you are going to go with X agency, but look, that's completely your decision. What I want you to know that is anything does change, I am here. Please come back to me and let me know. If there's any questions you had as you do go through the marketing process and you want to bounce off someone else, come back to me. Let me see what I can help you with. Still offer value, still offer your assistance, because when that cheaper fee doesn't deliver, because guys, they won't deliver, then they'll come back to you and you'll be there to hold their hand and take them through the process. That is absolutely key. The other key component is if you do miss it to a fee, the follow-up process you have after that. And we touch base on that in our round one, who to speak to, what to say, and what categories you want to be communicating with from a prospecting perspective. I give you all the touch points post appraisal process, which is at 1 week. And then we also have a whole nother week once we move them from the post-appraisal process and we move them into our database. How often should I be communicating to them? And this is key. BDMs don't follow up. So if you missed it initially, it doesn't mean you won't get it back within that 30-day period. All right, let's get into it because I know that's what you guys are here for. I know that you want to hear the fee objections, but I want you to know, more importantly, what you do from the moment the client calls in to all the way through to when you get to the fee topic is going to be far more valuable than these fee objections that I'm going to run through with you today, but I'm going to do it. So let's look at the objection. The other agency is cheaper. The key to overcoming this objection is breaking the cost down on a weekly basis. 1 or 2% can feel like a lot, but when it's broken down to $4, $5, $6, $7, depending on the weekly rent, which equals a coffee and a magazine, it really puts it into context with the client. So the other agency is cheaper. This is what I would work through with the client. Fees definitely vary between agencies. And look, we're certainly not the cheapest in the market, but we're absolutely not the most expensive either. What we offer is a fair fee for a great service. Now, you mentioned that X agency is 7.7% plus GST, and our fee is 8.8% plus GST. So for your property, that works out to be approximately $4.50, $5, whatever it is, on a weekly basis. What I like to encourage my clients to do when comparing agencies is not just to take into consideration the weekly commission the property management team's offering, but more so what that return will look like over a full 12-month period. And this has to be inclusive of considering the vacancy period and the weekly rent that property management team will achieve for you. In saying that, if you did want to compare from a weekly dollar perspective only, remember, we have to secure you an amazing tenant 1 or 2 days earlier than X agency, or rent your property for an extra $5 per week before we're actually much more cost effective than the cheaper agency. Pause. The key to this script is explaining where in your process that you're going to be able to make that value up. So I said 1 to 2 days earlier, or achieve them $5 a week extra, which makes up that percentage difference. Now, you've been detailed in the marketing process, in the tenant securing process of your appraisal. So when you actually point out that these parts of your process is where you're going to achieve them, that difference, they will have the confidence in knowing that you will do a better job than the cheaper agent, which will result in a higher weekly rent on an earlier lease date. Then what you could even follow with is a campaign result of a property that you've rented recently. So look, I want to give you an example of a client in this exact same situation as you. They were offered cheaper fees, and unfortunately they did end up initially going through with that cheaper agency. They sat on the market vacant for 30 days. Now their property was $500 a week. That actually ended up costing them $2,000 in a vacancy period. And the difference between myself and their property management fees worked out to be $5 a week. And it cost them $2,000. I could have managed their property for 1.5 years for what it cost them for the cheaper agency to not do what they needed them to do, which was to secure them a high quality tenant in a short time frame at a premium rent. And that's what I want to make sure doesn't happen to you, which is why I know the process we do from listing to leasing will absolutely secure you the outcome. So reference another property or reference another campaign. Reference a campaign where you put the property on the market, you listed it at $500 a week, but due to your marketing strategy, the tenants you had through the door, the competition you created, you achieved them an extra $15 a week. That actually covered 50% of the management fees for that client. And it actually brought our management fees down to 5%, which is less than what the cheaper agency is offering you. It makes financial sense to engage our agency to make sure that we get you the best overall result over that 12-month period. And return on investment for a landlord is a key component to having a successful investment journey. And pause. Hope that helps you guys with that first objection. I'm going to head straight into the next objection. What you're going to find is that overcoming these objections is all very, very similar. It's all about breaking it down to a dollar perspective, putting it into context for the client. So if we look at the objection, the other agents offered me X amount of management free. 3 months management free was what was in the area I come up against. So I'm going to reference a 3 months just because, again, I use a dollar perspective for this, but it's very similar to the initial script we just used. It's about breaking the dollar perspective down, then explaining to the client what part of your process is going to achieve them more, making the client aware that no one works well for free. It's simple. It's just not reasonable, but we, of course, want to do it in a courteous and professional manner. And this script always worked for me. Okay, again, let's look at this from an overall dollar perspective. You mentioned that X agencies offered you a 3-month free management period. So for your property, that works out to be $40 a week. So you'll be saving just shy of $500. Whilst we don't actually offer a management free period to engage new clients, and this is mainly because we're unable to provide the highest level of service your property deserves whilst working for free, what we can ensure you is that the process we have in place as we're marketing your property, the competition we create amongst tenants, and the intense vetting part of the process throughout the applications that we do when securing you a tenant will well and truly outweigh that initial $500 you'll be saving for that 3-month free period. We want to work to get you the best outcome, not the quickest. What we find is the agencies that are working for free during that period, unfortunately, do the basics. And sometimes if that. And what we do know in property management is that this can end up resulting in costing a landlord a substantial amount of money. The key there was a pause. Let the client speak first, because they'll respond with an objection, their objection to overcoming to your objection. That's when you listen to their pain point and you respond to that objection again. It's ongoing, I know. Thirdly is the free let fee. Now, this was a really, really common one in my area, but I rarely lost listings to this objection. And I believe that was a big factor to the detail I went through when I explained the marketing, vetting, and entry condition report, the tenant process, and the lease documents. In the challenge, we talk about what's your point of difference or what's your elevator pitch. It can't be you're honest. It can't be you're hardworking, because people just expect this. For me, my point of difference was coming from a selling background. I'm a big believer in your property's worth what someone's willing to pay for it. Renting is the same as selling. We're just dealing with tenants and landlords rather than buyers and sellers. It's my job to get you the best price in the market at that time. The more I get you, the more the property management team receives. It makes sense to make sure that we're getting you a premium rent with a premium tenant, because we're dealing with them on a daily basis and a reduced period. And the process, the marketing, the strategy I have and I'll implement on your behalf for your property is what's going to be the difference between $500 a week and $550 a week. So do you know, side note, your elevator pitch, your point of difference? Because by having this and knowing this, you're going to be able to overcome those objections. And for me, my point of difference really allowed me to overcome the objection around the free let fee. So explaining this in the process, when I was so detailed with what we did, when I got to the free section, when I got to the section and they mentioned the let fee, the client was very well aware of what the let fee covered. However, if I did come up against this objection, I'd counter with the following. The letting fee covers, as I mentioned throughout the appraisal, the letting fee covers a number of tasks that myself and the property management team are going to complete on your behalf. The big ticket item the letting fee covers, though, is the entry condition report. This is an extremely critical, lengthy, important part of the process that when your tenant moves out of the property, it makes sure it's handed back in the exact same condition in which they moved in. If this part of the letting process isn't done well or to our 5-star standard, and the property management team you've engaged have rushed through it, it can result in costing you as the owner a large sum of money at the end of the tenancy, which is what we want to avoid. The letting fee also covers the time that our property management team will spend on processing vetting leasing applicants for potential tenants applying for your property. If the correct due diligence isn't done here, this can result in the wrong tenant being put in your property, which we know will end very badly for everyone. I'm sure you've heard about those horror stories on A Current Affair about a tenant who's completely damaged a property, or maybe you've had a friend or family that's fallen victim to this. This is exactly why we charge a letting fee, as we want to ensure that we're able to spend the appropriate time in this initial part of the process to keep your property well maintained and cared for with the right tenant in place. And I just don't believe that anyone doing this for free is able to offer you that same level of service, detail, or professionalism. They'll understand, guys. No one works for free well. It just isn't reasonable. What you'll notice about my objections is they're long, they're detailed, and this is because you're defending that fee. You need to explain why you warrant a let fee, why they shouldn't take that 3 months free management, why your value is more than 2% difference, $10 a week. And guys, I know I've talked round figures on a $500 or $450 a week property, and you may work in a higher market, but it's all relative. Yes, the number's bigger, but the number of damage or the amount of damage is bigger. $1,000 a week property, I'm sorry, a $4,000 a week bond just isn't going to cover the damage that could be done if the entry condition report process isn't done detailed enough. At the end of the tenancy, we go to the vacate and the property management team can't hold the tenant to the damage because it's not listed in the entry condition report as being there, not being there beforehand. It's about the detail you provide. Now, lastly, when it comes to the marketing objection, there's obviously quite a few. Photos, listings online, signboards, and I do have a script for every single one of them. I think today we're covering 4 of the 12 objection scripts I have included as part of the fee objection module in our challenge. But today I wanted to focus on the marketing costs for realestate.com domain, whoever your online portal is listing. I did have a non-negotiable marketing package when I was a BDM, to the point that in the past, I'd told clients that if they were unwilling to invest in marketing, then that was completely their choice. But in that instance, we weren't the right agency for them. During the appraisal, you will have in-depth explain the importance of marketing, why we do it, how we're strategic with the way we take photos, the order of photos in which we put them, the time that you launch to realestate.com, how tenants engage with the listing online, when the engagement levels spike. So by the time you come to the cost section of the portal listing, the client would ideally already know the worthwhile cost. But if they don't and they didn't want to pay for an online portal, you could use something like this. When advertising your property online via realestate.com, there's 4 different types of advertising options to choose from. They offer a premier, a highlight listing, a feature, and a standard listing. For our clients, we've negotiated a reduced rate with realestate.com for either a highlight or a premier listing to ensure that your property is at the forefront of the rental market's mind. If you've looked on realestate.com or domain recently, or even in the past, you would have noticed the size difference in the ad, as well as the standout features that aim to entice more potential tenants, or in your instance, if you were buying buyers. The reason we recommend our clients choosing either a highlight or premier listing is because they have the best reach and they looked most visually appealing to potential tenants. Another big benefit is that your property is going to remain in a predominant position on realestate.com. And I'm sure you know yourself, when you're looking for something online, you very rarely click past page 1. Tenants are the exact same with their real estate looking. These ads are also more user-friendly. Tenants have an ability to click through the photos on the main page of realestate.com without actually clicking into the listing. We know people are very limited with their time, so the aim of these features is to make looking for a rental property online quick and easy. This will then result in more people actually attending the property for an inspection. More people create competition, competition drives price, and from our experience, that's what 99% of investors want. Now, there's a number more fee objections that clients can come up. And as I mentioned, they're all separate, and you should have absolutely no issue overcoming these objections if you've in detail explained the process in the appraisal. So I could only get through 4 today, and I've come to my 41-minute mark. So I think I've done pretty well with time. I hope you've gotten some serious value from those scripts and some serious value or reevaluation around what you need to do before you even get to this fee objection conversation. As Terry mentioned, we are running round 2 of the Next Level Growth Challenge, and it kickstarts on the 14th of June, which is really exciting. We're almost sold out. Registrations close on Friday this week. We're going to shoot you through an email after this session with a link, which will give you all the information you need around the challenge, or you can head over to pmXcite website and click on the growth section. In the meantime, check it out. We would absolutely love to have you as part of round 2. What I've given you today, I promise you, is a drop in the sea of what I'll give you throughout the challenge. The scripts, the dialogues, the email templates, the processes I use to sign 333 managements in a 12-month period. I'm energetic, I'm passionate, I want to see you get the results, and we'd absolutely love to have you as part of round 2 Next Level Growth Challenge. Thank you so much for joining us today, guys. If you did have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me about the Next Level Growth Challenge. You can find me also at the website or also on my Facebook page, Natalie South, pmXcite Growth Expert. Thanks for tuning in today, guys, and hopefully see you guys all in round 2.